Hinduism's beginnings. Many people's impressions of India are dominated by the Taj Mahal, a monument of Islamic, not Hindu, culture. Popular assessments of Indian culture place the Mughal era, 1525 to 1761, far higher than the British Raj, even though foreign dominance was comparable to that of the latter. Such a mindset makes sense in America, whose history has evolved over a similar period. But it is not a valid defense in Britain, where popular cultural stereotyping goes back to the Norman conquest in 1066. Indian culture and religion have been around for over 5,000 years. The ability of Hinduism to adapt is remarkably demonstrated by the fact that it has survived and flourished over time. This ability is often undervalued by the religion's apparent dominance of traditional attitudes. But what is Hinduism? There are many different ways that religion can appear. Since it encompasses the entire Indian way of life, we cannot refer to it as a traditional religion. A Hindu ritual or doctrine can have different meanings depending on the group. Nonetheless, most people concur that Hinduism is a distinct and unambiguous religion. What comes to mind when we think about Hinduism? Is it the customs and beliefs of the ignorant villagers, or the traditional intelligentsia? Is every aspect of the ceremony being recorded? Are the beliefs of those we, or their fellow Hindus, considered to be the most orthodox being listed? Or are we attempting to analyze religious reasoning? It is impossible to describe a religion entirely due to the vast number of distinct religions and cultural practices. We should concentrate on what makes Hinduism unique and different from other major religions, even though being too selective would mean ignoring its diversity. However, its historical background can only explain the uniqueness of a religion that flourishes without the unifying influence of a shared doctrine, a hierarchical structure, or a historical founder. Nonetheless, attempts to define Hinduism as a test of orthodoxy are commonly made internally or externally. Stereotypes often shape external perceptions of Hinduism, especially among the general public. Common stereotypes claim that Hindus, like people in much of Asia, worship cows, believe that the world is a delusion, identify religion with India, are excessively fixated on religion and the caste system, and practice vegetarianism and non-violence. Let's begin with the last point. Despite its enormous influence, Hinduism and India cannot be compared. They found Glai there. India was the birthplace of Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, in addition to Islam, Judaism, Zoroastrianism, and Christianity. However, due to cultural diffusion, Hinduism has spread outside of India, particularly to Bali, as well as to the West Indies and East Africa. Hinduism has spread outside of India, thanks to recent population changes and gurus who spread false beliefs. The spread of Hinduism in Bali was merely a part of a larger cultural and economic growth trend that affected most of Southeast Asia, where Buddhism was obviously influenced by Hinduism. The caste system has been greatly simplified and is becoming less common in these regions, though these extra-Indian adaptations are outside the scope of this book. Furthermore, religious fervour is a more complex problem than it first seems. For a Hindu, everything is infused with religion. However, this does not mean that it is an obsession. Hindus consider religion to be a fundamental aspect of their identity. Hindus do not see religion as an outside obligation. Religion cannot be viewed as separate because life is a cohesive whole with interdependent parts. Indeed, since there isn't a more comprehensive term in English, Dharma is commonly translated as religion, even though it has a broader meaning. This is because Sanskrit requires a word that can be translated as religion. It encompasses not just religious traditions, but also social mores and legal mandates. The foundation of Indian society, the caste system, is seen by many as an integral part of their religion. The karma doctrine, which holds that an individual's current social status is based on the total of their past actions in previous lifetimes, gives it a religious basis. To the extent that Hinduism is both a religion and a social structure, the caste system has become an integral component of the religion. On the other hand, the caste system in Hinduism has already become less common outside of India. More significantly, some Indians question the validity of the caste system. The devotional movement and the famous Vaishnava theologian Ramanuja from the 12th century both tend to disagree. AD referred to Shrees, Vinayu's consort family, and gave the untouchables the name Tirukulata, which strikingly prefigures the name popularized by B.V. Mahatma Gandhi of Lari, a people of Hari, Vainayu. Such caste-related attitudes were limited to the distinctly religious field. This merely emphasizes that, despite its close connection to Hinduism, caste is not essential to the religion. It's interesting to note the common misunderstanding that karma is the same as fatalism. One's present state is determined by one's past deeds, and one's future state is determined by one's present deeds. Consequently, a man shapes himself and chooses his own destiny. Vegetarianism is another oversimplified subject. It is a common practice among the elite Brahmins. However, this practice has never been widely adopted by lower caste Hindus who frequently struggle to afford meat. Non-violence is one of the religion's central tenets. Even if it's not necessary, this makes me hesitant to commit murder. However, when this can and often does lead to the use of a threat of death by fasting as a form of moral blackmail, the whole purpose of the idea is undermined. This idea has had very little effect, as evidenced by the fact that political murder was common in Calcutta a few years ago. The economic importance of the cow as a source of milk and related products in the early days made killing productive animals undesirable, even though the doctrine of non-violence probably originates from the cow's veneration. However, considering the pragmatic rationale behind its introduction, the belief in the sanctity of the cow is too superficial to be regarded as fundamental, even though it is a prominent feature of popular Hinduism. Similarly, many sensible hygienic practices were widely adopted after receiving religious approval. For example, despite its seeming indifference and even disgust, using cow dung and urine as purification material has both practical and religious significance. Like many others, the ancient Iranians used cow urine as a cleansing agent because of its high ammonia content, which clearly disinfects. At least some protection against diseases like typhoid is provided by the rigid separation of the right hand for eating and the left hand for cleaning oneself after defecating. Such practices frequently become pointless rituals once religion gives its approval. The notion that the world is illusory is too limited if the respect for cows is too shallow. Hinduism, its writings, or the mainstream religion have never expressed this perspective. However, this perspective is still limited to a single philosophical tradition. Every traditional philosophical system except Advaita Vedanta adopts a realist viewpoint. This view is only supported by the fact that Advaita Vedanta is the most well-known Indian philosophy in the West. Do the external definitions need to be updated? What is the performance of the internal criteria? The most commonly mentioned are acceptance of the Vedic authority, adherence to caste laws combined with reverence for Brahmins, and belief in an eternal self, Hitman, undergoing an endless cycle of rebirth, Safe Zira. While each has some merit, these are only partially satisfactory. Despite having deep religious roots, the caste system is superfluous, as was previously mentioned. In actuality, Hindus have traditionally considered violating caste laws to be a serious offence, rather than separating themselves from any particular doctrine or religious practice. Outcasting, instead of excommunication, may entail losing one's caste status, but not one's religion. Respect for Brahmins is widespread among the more pious, even though some sects reject their claims to supremacy. Furthermore, not all Hindus are obligated to partake in any sacraments. Beliefs in the eternal self and the cycle of rebirth are now nearly universal in Hinduism. We might need to broaden this criterion to encompass various beliefs. The cycle of rebirth is accepted by people who are not Buddhists. Due to their evolution from Hinduism, Jains and Sikhs might not be regarded as significant, but they occasionally engage in various religious traditions, such as Neoplatonism and Orphism, the Kabbalah, and the Dukobars. The notion of rebirth for their community members is rejected by the Liturgites. The Deva Samaj was founded in 1898 by Shiv Narayan Agnihotri, who denied the hitman's existence beforehand and claimed it either goes to heaven or dies. The doctrine concerning Itman and Saf. Most Hindu philosophical schools may consider the concepts of Sira, Karma and Moksha, release from the cycle, axiomatic. Accepting these ideas, however, does not equate to being a Hindu. Some Hindus do not hold these views. The ability of Hinduism to tolerate potentially schismatic developments has always been demonstrated. In fact, the caste system's primary purpose has been to integrate different tribes and sects into the social structure. Hindu society is thus divided horizontally by castes and vertically by sects. However, the vertical one is less rigid and exclusive compared to the horizontal division. Acceptance of the Vedas' authority is the most commonly used criterion. However, the main reason is that the Vedas contain the least information. It frequently only acts as a statement of a person's Hindu identity. People still recite particular Vedic hymns at weddings and funerals despite their ignorance. When the Veda, which Hindus consider the sole source of true religion, was rejected, Buddhism and Jainism split off as separate religions. The loss of accurate knowledge happened early, and the works of medieval commentators provided ample evidence of incomplete understanding, even though the three higher classes made studying the Vedas an absolute duty. The reciters faithfully transmitted the Atharvaveda, one of the most important Vedic texts, but most philosophers and religious teachers still needed to learn about it. Even the schools that professed to study the Veda did so from a very limited and biased perspective. The Meph-Marpsa deals extensively with the ritual commands, while ignoring the hymns and much else, while the Vedanta focuses almost exclusively on the Upanishads, which have surely had the biggest direct influence on the development of later Hindu thought. The attachment of other philosophies to the Veda was highly beneficial. The Veda was unknown in India until it was discovered by European scholars. It is unnecessary to believe in the Veda's authority because it is criticized by many Hindu devotional trends. The founder of the Lingayats, Basava, disapproved of the Vedic and Brahmanical authority, among other reasons, and Tantrism is viewed with considerable ambivalence by various schools of thought. Even though the Veda is regarded as the holy book of Hinduism, most Hindus do not read it. The majority of Hindus, including all women and people from lower castes, were forbidden from reading the Veda. Its inaccessibility, however, has allowed for a nearly limitless interpretation of doctrine. Any innovation that appeals to the Vedic authority will be respected. The Hindu definition of heresy is relative, as demonstrated by the tradition's flexibility in embracing various heterodox movements. Originating in a Hindu environment, the Jains insist on qualifying any statement and have a relativistic view of reality. According to this perspective, each statement is true only in the context in which it is made. But we frequently ignore these restrictions in our day-to-day interactions. Any study of Hinduism will inevitably involve many generalizations of this type. These generalizations will always be exceptions, even though they apply to the vast majority of Hindus. In a way, Hindus' unconscious recognition of this diversity, which is hard to explain, leads them to invoke their purported Vedic origins, realizing that their common history is a unifying factor. Both an implicit acceptance of the reality of adaptation and an affirmation of the importance of tradition are made possible by the Vedic reference. The earliest form of Hinduism, still practiced today, is recorded in the 4 Vedas. The religion represented by these collections of ritual hymns was brought to North India by the Aryans, who arrived between 1500 and 1000 C, but it is clear that they were composed over a significant period in their current form. The Rigveda is the oldest, written around 1200 BC, due to its language and obvious connections to the Iranian faith, which Zarathustra converted to before 1000 SC. The Avesta contained documentation of it. The Yajurveda, which in turn follows the Samaveda, is closely followed by the Atharvaveda. The Brahma-Iyas, a different collection of writings, evolved the Vedic content over an extended period. They were distinguished from the Vedas by their prose style and noticeably later language. They expanded the Brahma-Iya subdivision to include the Ara-Iyakas, a philosophy that was compatible with composition before the rise of Buddhism, or around 500 BC, is revealed by the Upanishad advertisements. The Vedas don't have a predetermined pantheon. The Rigveda recognizes 33 gods connected to the earth, heaven and sky's waters, just like Iranian tradition does. Other gods are also mentioned in the Rigveda, though the Brahma-Iyas lists them in a different order. Only the Vedic cult recognized the most recent iterations of the gods' images used in the domestic ritual. The highly mobile ritual incorporated the sacrificial stake into the cosmic tree, connecting the 3 cosmic regions using the sacrificer's house for minor and special terrains for major rites. Fire and Soma were the 2 primary elements of the sacrifice, just as they were in Iran. Using the juice as a hallucinogenic beverage and libation, the worshipper honored the gods Agni and Soma. Sacrifice was central to the Vedic religion. The Brahmavata region, roughly equivalent to present-day Haryana, is most likely where the hymns of the Rigveda, the oldest and most important source of Vedic religion, were composed. The climatic characteristics they describe serve as the foundation for this conclusion. Some scholars say they are located east or west of Punjab. People transmitted them orally in the past because they believed them to be too scared to write down. The text contains copious internal evidence of the accuracy of the preservation, which is corroborated by the other Vedas. They only offer a different viewpoint on their respective eras' religious practices and beliefs. Priests worshipped the major gods with hymns, many composed in highly complex poetry. However, some hymns stand out for their simple language and ideas. Myths need thorough explanations, even though they are mentioned a lot. The majority of people concentrate on the Soma ritual, giving the hieratic perspectives the most thought. Not much attention is paid to animal sacrifice. The rarest and most important animal sacrifice is that of horses. Comprising stanzas composed in 15 different meters, the 1028 hymns are approximately the same length as Homer's works and are usually complete in and of themselves, though they are often grouped in threes. The collection is organized into 10 books, with the core consisting of the homogeneous books 2 through 7 and the rest being later additions. According to tradition and internal evidence, each original book was written by seers from the same family, following a standard format consisting of groups of hymns addressed to different gods in descending order of significance. They rank the minor deities Agni and Indra first and second. The number of hymns and stanzas in each group determines how the books are arranged. The oldest edition is the second part of Book 1, followed by its first part and Book 8, which form a unit like the earlier family books. It differs from the earlier family books, especially regarding meter and arrangement. The entire ninth book is composed of hymns to Soma, which are essentially non-existent in the books that came before it. Although the compilation must be kept up to date, many of the hymns in the ninth book are as old as any other, having been collected for ceremonial convenience from earlier compilations. Even though some of the hymns in the 10th book are still early, their later character is generally demonstrated by their language, Varuna's role as the guardian of arti and meter, and their content. As the older gods, like Varmia, Mitra, and the Asvins, are replaced by more abstract ones, their importance diminishes. Several hymns speculate philosophically. Others concentrate on popular religion, providing spells and family rites. One hymn mentions the 4 classes of society and provides a theological explanation of the system, reflecting the changing social structure. The main feature of the Vedic gods is their power over human life. Morality is less important, though it is sometimes present. In addition, the gods stand for the basic components of nature, including fire, the sun, and thunderstorms, and respond kindly to sacrifice. While powerful anti-gods like Viftra, whose conquest is a top priority, bring on other natural disasters like disease and drought, the gods usually associate Rudra with destruction. The gods invoke Varuna, and to a lesser extent the more erratic Indra to punish sin and absolve Agni of guilt. Major deities are invoked in all earlier books. Minor deities are not evenly distributed. This suggests that their significance was restricted to particular groups of worshippers. The Rigveda calls its gods Indra, Deva, and Asura, though they sometimes distinguish between the two. It alludes to an Indo-European supreme deity that is all but extinct, which the Iranian Ahura Mazda might represent. Asura is a Vedic word that means lord or powerful. The word's meaning remains the same, but the associated being does. The most adored deity among Aryans and Veda poets was Indra. Almost a quarter of all hymns are about Indra. He rules the middle region between earth and heaven as its deity. According to some hymns, Indra's parents, sky and earth, were actually split up for eternity because they were so appalled when their son found Soma and started drinking, which led to his massive growth. According to some, he is the son of Tiva, the great father and all-creature creator. More than other deities, anthropomorphic descriptions highlight his enormous size and physical prowess. His arms are strong enough for him to wield his weapons. His hair and appearance are typically tawny. There are variations of each hymn based on the word for tawny. He is unquestionably powerful, both in mythology as the thunder god who defeats the demons of drought and darkness to liberate the waters or win the light, and in human life as the god of war who helps the Aryans conquer North India. Therefore, the only weapon that can be attributed to him is the Vajra or thunderbolt that Tiva made for him. He is superior to both men and gods in power. He is more often described as mighty by the terms Sakra, Salivate, Sachipati, and Satakratu than by any other deity. The other gods, who often regard him as their king, all yield to him in authority. The heart of the core myth of Indra is his battle with the serpent Viftra, who is obstructing the sky and the waters. He, his friends, and the Maruts are excited as Soma escorts them. When he kills Viftra with his bolt, the waters are released and heaven and earth tremble in fear. He was responsible for producing the sun and locating the cows that the nomadic Aryan herders relied on. Now allow me to proclaim Indra's heroic deeds. The thunderbolt carrier was the first person to kill the snake and create a water passageway, and keep the mountain trails apart. He killed the snake as it clung to the mountain. For him, Tiva made the thunderbolt sound, like low cows. The flow of the water, they descended directly to the ocean. Avi 132:1. The exact nature of this water release has been the subject of much speculation. It was mistaken for rain in the 19th century, uncommon in the ancient Aryan homeland. Though more fantastical, this interpretation was just as literal. According to one theory, the collapse of the agriculturally based civilization in the Indus Valley before the Aryan incursions was caused by the dam's destruction. But as a creation myth, the Viftra myth, in which Viftra murders him to represent chaos, has become widely accepted. Indra creatively created the sunrise each morning and on the yearly winter solstice, dividing the land from the water and the upper regions from the north. Thus, Indra starts the differentiation and evolution by eliminating the resistance or inertia of the primordial mountain's underlying chaos. Occasionally, Indra transforms the non-existent into the existent. The fact that Indra is frequently referred to as the slayer of Vrtra highlights how important this accomplishment is to his persona. The Avesta's parallel depiction of Ithdraghna, the god of victory, confirms Vrtrahan's age. Indra, however, also fights alongside the Aryans and numerous other enemies. Priests transform the Vrtra myth into the Vala myth. The myth states that the powerful warrior Indra overthrows Vala and releases the light from a mountain cave using a hymn or other ceremonial means. The myth actually states that Brahaspati frequently joins or replaces Indra. The Arijarasis occasionally take centre stage alongside Brahaspati, a lesser-known deity who must be part of the original pantheon. Indra's original name was unquestionably Brahaspati, which denoted his position as king of the gods and priest. Originally referred to as hymn or formula, the phrase Lord of Brahman refers to the potency of rituals. The priestly deity Agni is sometimes called this. The Vedic king's religious responsibilities were eventually assumed by professional priests. Here, Brahaspati took Indra's place. These utilitarian gods originated in previous divine names, particularly in the Rigveda's 10th hook. Their names are typically formed with the suffix Lord. The guardian of the RT principle, Varuna, is farther away than Indra and may have previously held a higher position in the pantheon. Mitra is commonly linked to Varuna. In fact, many hymns invoke Varuna and Mitra at the same time, as Mitra Varuna, at least 24 of which address the pair, 8 of which address Varuna alone, and 1 of which addresses Mitra. This combined invocation has its roots in the Indo-Iranian era, when Mithra and Ahura Mazda, also known as the Wise Lord, were closely related in the Avesta. Varuna is often called an Asura in the Avesta, which uses wise language to describe him. As a result, Varuna's many names are all appropriate. He has snares or bonds to keep evildoers in check. Varuna is a king who rules over heaven and earth, whose wrath inspires fear and bestows mercy and punishment. This binding property explains Varuna's name, even though its root meaning, oath, is more in line with his general disposition, and Mitra's name, which obviously means treaty, contract. Varuna and Mitra use spies in different places, especially the sun, to keep tabs on men's adherence to righteousness. Their guardianship of vows, titles, and kingly positions all reveal their moral failings. Dumazil and his school emphasize the strength of Varu's position by seeing Mitra and Varu as the embodiments of the Indo-European sovereign gods. The static components of royal power are symbolized by Varu, the guardian of Arta, the universe's natural and moral orderly principle. As the all-powerful ruler of both men and gods, he measured the area of the earth and created heaven and earth. As the Lord, the Punisher, and the Keeper of established observances, people implore him to forgive them and set them free from sin. The lofty hymns to Varmia, a more moral ruler than other gods, frequently address transgression and forgiveness. One important warning is that for human behavior on earth to be in harmony with the cosmic order or RTR, men must fully understand it. Therefore, to please Varuna, they might unintentionally violate his ordinances. In this regard, Varuna's mi-yi, or strength and inventiveness, can be deceptive. Initially, Varuna's moral authority and sovereignty are highlighted by at least a minor mythological connection. His sporadic Asura title and declining significance in the Rigveda may hint at his association, particularly with the period prior to the Devas' dominion, with the seas and the night, and being an all-knowing celestial king. More specifically, RRA and Varuna's realm are in the next world. Varuna, the god of the primordial, undifferentiated cosmos, may have been reduced by Indra's artistic endeavours to the lordship of those elements that are left over from and still represent the original chaos, the night sky, the netherworld, and the waters, whether they are in the night sky or beneath the earth. The principle of Urta, which Varuna uses to govern the world's activities, and which in a sense predates the evolution of the world, is later superseded by the related principle of Dharma. The principle of Urta, which Varuna uses to govern the world's activities, and which in a sense predates the evolution of the world, is later superseded by the related principle of Dharma. Agni is a well-known fire god in the Veda. Except for the 8th and 9th books, the Veda contains over 200 hymns that invoke Agni. These hymns mostly associate him with Indra, even going so far as to call him Indra Fiftrahan and refer to him as a dual deity, more often than any other. Although his martial connections are evident in his exhortations to burn his devotees' enemies, he also controls the forest fire and the cremation fire, using the austerity power, tapas, or heat, to destroy the unbelievers who try to use the right for evil. He becomes a real-life illustration of the power of sexual desire. Fire was extremely valuable to early humans, but they needed help to obtain or manage it. The myth of Matarisvan bringing Agni down from heaven and the Greek legend of Prometheus are two examples. Iranians highly value fire and have complex rituals based on its meaning. The Vedic tradition holds that Agni is a visitor to every home's domestic hearth, who identifies with the occupant of that home. He is particularly linked to humanity. However, the primary factor contributing to Agni's fame is his status as the sacrificial fire. Agni pulls the gods down to offer sacrifices and transports the offering to heaven as the altar burns. Personified, often called by various titles, he is the mediator between humans and gods, the divine counterpart of human priests in all their capacities. He is the multidimensional, all-pervading priest who understands the various functions of the sacrifice. He is omniscient, the author of wisdom and prayer, and the inner light that guides men through the complexities of the ritual. Like the human priests, he is a poet, a sage, and a seer. His priestly role is best illustrated by his association with Indra, whom he serves as a priest accompanying a human king. He actively fights the common enemy with his special arsenal of rites and mantras. Agni's nature is inevitably grounded in the physical world. His form and origin are still a matter of speculation, but he has limited the growth of any mythology. According to legend, he is reborn daily from his parents, the kindling sticks, which he devours right away. He is also said to have been born from himself, which is how he got his nickname, Tamwan Napat. Ironically, he is also said to have come from the waters as Apa 111 Napat, an ancient Iranian religious concept sometimes addressed as a unique deity, and probably symbolizes the lightning that flashes from the clouds. Because of this, Agni is primordial, like the fire of heaven, and eternally young, rekindled every day. He is many, like the fires, and one, like a deity. In his universal aspect, Agni is the subject of a late hymn. In her conclusion, the poet Agni Vaisvanara discusses the relationship between the many manifestations and the one universal deity, emphasizing that this is merely a minor aspect of a bigger problem. 10.88 In terms of frequency, Soma comes after Agni and Indra. Agni and Soma are similar in the material sacrifice implements found in the oldest sections of the Veda, because Soma is a plant whose juice is the essence of the Vedic ritual. Both gods' physical underpinnings consistently prevent their anthropomorphism from progressing. Soma's actions originate from the other gods. In particular, Soma is closely associated with these two deities because Indra consumes it and Agni's ritualistic practices. Nonetheless, the Soma is the main object of priestly concern, and the simple procedures of pressing and straining the juice have given rise to the most elaborate imagery. In addition to 6 hymns in other books, the 9th book of the Vedas is devoted to the plant and deity Soma. Soma was prepared and offered as part of Indo-Iranian worship, and there are many parallels between the cults of Hauma and Soma. Nonetheless, the notion that a particular kind of honey or mead is a potent beverage of the gods originated in Indo-European times. The legends of the eagle and Soma are clearly similar. The similarities between the eagle of Zeus bringing nectar and the eagle of Odin bringing mead are clear, especially since Madhu, or honey, is frequently associated with Soma. It is traditional to pound the plant with a stone 3 times a day, or press it with stones that rest on askin to extract its juice. The pressed juice is filtered by sheep's wool before being given to Vayu and Indra. The Soma is filtered, put into vats or jars, and sweetened with water and milk. This combination creates a unique bond between Soma and the waters, who view him as their father. He is sometimes called rain, suggesting that the initial ritual was centered on generating rain. Soma is a loud, thundering god fertilizing the waters, which are his bulls. Soma is a deity who inspires hymns and provokes contemplation as a poet, sage, and seer. We draw attention to Soma's exciting power as the draught of immortality, the divine beverage known as Amrita, which grants immortality to humans and gods. Because of Soma's unwavering support during his conflict with Vevtra, Indra attributes his adventures and cosmic actions to him. After eating Soma, Indra awakens the sun again, and Soma is credited with this feat. This is a tiny step towards Soma developing into a vast cosmic force that can create the 2 worlds and influence everyone. Soma controls the earth, the gods, people and plants. The priest who crushed the Soma stalks released his victorious, energizing and life-promoting power, knowing King Soma would die in this ritual. The mythology highlights Soma's early birth, especially in the cosmogonic myth. Fire and liquid, heat and coolness, are the opposite but complementary elements that Agni and Soma symbolize. In some of the most recent Veda hymns, Soma is linked to the moon, just as Agni is to the sun. According to the Veda, Soma and Agni were once housed inside the primordial hill and were guarded by a snake or dragon that stood for the strength of resistance. The identity of the Soma plant is a matter of considerable debate. The Veda and Avesta claim that it bloomed on mountains. It could have been the hallucinogenic mushroom Amanita muscaria, which grows in the mountains of Afghanistan but not in the plains of India, or the fly agaric. The Aryan invasion of India through this route led to a gradual loss of contact with the regions where the Soma plant originated, and consequently a loss of knowledge about its true nature. At the same time, ritual elaboration increased steadily. This is more than just a temporal relationship. The actual plant was replaced by a useless substitute. The expectations of the ritual, which led to their own fulfillment, may have compensated for its lack by creating a feeling of ecstasy and divine communion through purely ceremonial means. This paved the way for the religion's subsequent evolution, where a growing focus on consciously influencing oneself to attain specific states surfaced. The pantheon's major figures are complemented by a number of minor deities, each with unique attributes. Dyaus, heaven, and Prithvi, earth, are well known and practically inseparable. Restoring Earth from its initial chaos marks the start of material and spiritual order. Often called Father and Mother, they are the parents of all living things and the gods through a symbolic act of procreation. Aditi is a goddess of nature with a much wider influence. The most accurate translation of her name is freedom, which denotes ideas of immensity and scope that stretch from the free, boundless space of the universe to the inner space of the gods. She is the mother and father of all gods and creation because of her all-pervading nature. We usually say this is the Great Mother's sole physical characteristic. This characteristic is the basis for her identification with the cow and the earth, the most well-known portrayal of motherhood in India. She is frequently invoked to provide freedom from physical illness, spiritual sin, and all forms of harm. The primary diva figures are her sons, who are collectively known by the derivative name Adityas, and who, when worshipped, are also good for humanity. The most specific of the solar deities is Surya, son of Dyaus, whose name alludes to both the god and the actual sun. He drives the darkness away from humans and gods as he speeds his chariot across the sky. Sometimes he is portrayed as a gleaming white horse or an eagle. The wind is another powerful natural force that we rarely use. In Iranian tradition, his doublet, Vayu, is far more significant than Vat and more abstractly symbolizes the wind. Vayu, the breath of God and the energy that created the universe, was close to Indra and had the honor of consuming Soma. Another female character in the almost exclusively male pantheon is the Dawn, sometimes portrayed as Surya's spouse. She is a powerful goddess who represents the victory of light over darkness and life over death. She is invoked by about 20 hymns of exquisite beauty, which link Dawn's inherent beauty to the benefits she provides to humanity. The twin gods known as the Asvins and the Greek Dioscuri have obvious parallels. Together they serve as fertility and warrior deities in the Rigveda. They do not, however, have the same father. According to Iranian tradition and internal sources, these roles were initially distinct. Most of the time, hooks 1 and 10 feature Yama, the deceased ruler. Only in the most recent sections of the Rigveda do the poets of the earlier books share with us their thoughts on death and the afterlife. His divinity is implied by his association with the gods. The title of King of the Dead is specifically given to Hut alone. He is particularly close to Agni, who transports the dead to his realm. He also has a twin sister named Yamel, consistent with the Indo-Iranian myth of two ancient twins who are said to have created the human race. The figure of Viryu is another example of how the religious beliefs of the Aryans are not adequately reflected in the hymns of the Rigveda. Of course, he was a major figure in men's minds, but he is hardly mentioned in the hymns. However, his core personality resembles later mythology, where he has a larger role. He treats people with kindness and never aggression. He is able and eager to lavish his followers with riches. He is also concerned about the survival of the human race. Like the sun, he is a solar deity who bestows blessings from heaven, using his all-pervading, life-giving energy. Vayu is Indra's friend and ally. He aids Indra in his struggle against Vrtra and expands the distance between heaven and earth. Indeed, in a single hymn, Viryu opens Vala's cowpen. They collaborate as equal partners and representatives of the two powerful, benevolent forces of the sun and rain. But Viryu isn't as involved. The two gods can occasionally become so similar that they practically merge into Indra Vishnu, adopting each other's characteristics and behaviours. One of Vishu's most well-known mythological accomplishments is his three-step march through the universe, which originates from the terms wide-going and wide-striding. In his early incarnations, these 3 steps represented his strength and presence, moving through the earth, sky, and worlds beyond human comprehension, much like the sun in the sky. His highest step is thus Prada, his home, which is located at the meridian. The hymn's use of the designations dwelling in the mountains and standing on the mountains is interpreted by some as referring to the sun looking down from the mountaintops, while others read it as referring to the mountains acting as habitats for water reserves and beneficial plants. V9U goes into greater detail about these 3 stages, defining the world's limits and claiming it is suitable for human habitation. Another aspect of Vishnu's all-pervasiveness is his possible interpretation as the cosmic pillar. The heavens are supported and guided by the mythic center of the universe. He resides in the mountains that hold up the firmament. He owns Thalipa, the cosmic pillar represented by the stake to which the sacrificed victim is fastened. People pray to him for divine gifts and guidance to protect them from all evil because of his close connection to the sacrifice. By ceremoniously imitating God's 3 steps, the duly consecrated sacrificer becomes V9U and accomplishes the highest aim. Rudra's destructive nature contrasts sharply with V9U's kindness. He portrays a dangerous character living in the mountains, with skin and braided hair. He has a brown complexion, a black belly, and a red back. Whether or not they are offended, people fear him for his unrelenting rage, and they implore him to bless humanity, primarily but not solely, to spare them from his wrath. What are we to say to Rudra, the attentive one, the most liberal and kind one, the extremely powerful one, that makes his heart as happy as possible? Is an example of a euphemism. This is a goal that is frequently pursued. V143 Hall 1, Siva, which means auspicious and is rarely used to describe Rudra in the Rigveda, was the name given to his successor in post-Vedic mythology. However, the worshipper requested Rudra spare men and cattle rather than physically present himself. In Rigveda, the Rudra is subordinate. He is sometimes regarded as a storm god, though his origins and intentions remain unknown. He is hostile and malicious, but he does not battle demons. Despite being the father of the Maruts, he never identifies with their combat adventures as Indra does. Additionally, he and Agni are very close, probably because his name was taboo. People only use this epithet in passing. His name is frequently translated as the Howler, but its origins may be heavenly, bright, or red, a hue strongly connected to death. Rudra is portrayed in the Rigveda as an outsider and misfit. In contrast to the other gods, the only sacrifice offered to Rudra is a thrown food ball. The offerings are accepted by a variety of local and possibly malevolent spirits. Rudra is a revenue source in the Vedic pantheon. Rudra most likely entered the Vedic pantheon through contacts with an indigenous group, either the descendants of the Indus Valley Civilization studied later or some lesser-known source. Unlike the structure of the Veda is more fascinating than its literary or historical content, Rigveda. As ritual became more intricate, a development already apparent in the later parts of the Rigveda, the Veda was a guide to the simians or chants used by priests called udgars. 4 sets of chants, known as jinas, provide instructions on how to sing the verses in addition to the text itself. The style is similar to Western medieval plainsong, which is also based on a heptatonic scale, and the music seems to have been preserved almost as faithfully as the words. But just like the Vedas, the notation wasn't recorded until recently. The jinas use a range of interjections to match the words to the melodies. Instead of arranging the verses as hymns, we divide them up and arrange them according to the ritual's requirements. Although there are frequently specific variations because of the 2 collections' differing purposes, they almost always come from the 8th and 9th books of the Rigveda. The Yajurveda, a more creative compilation of ritual materials, draws inspiration from the Vedic hymns. Nonetheless, it incorporates newly written material into the older verses, often altered to suit their new purpose, to account for the profusion of new ceremonies and the astounding growth of ritual detail. Unlike the Simians, who chanted the titles Yajus, the Advaryu priest and his helpers performed the sacrifice while muttering the prose-written words. According to the Rigveda, the mechanics of sacrifice are valued more highly than those of the gods who carried it out. Invocations to the sacrificial implements, which stand in for the gods themselves, might have resulted. The spells and riddles are similar to those in the Atharvaveda and the Upanishads. They use syllables like of that have mystical connotations, al and vayat, which ultimately evolved into the Tantras' magical formulas. The gods are still invoked in litanies such as the Atharvaveda, which honours Rudra by reciting his many names and abbreviations, enabling the devotee to mystically identify with aspects of the deity's personality. Because he is associated with the sacrifice, his fame increases. There is no single coherent text in the Yajurveda. However, the Yajurveda has been transmitted through 2 recensions, each containing sub-recensions. The names are believed to reflect the adulteration of prose commentary material with the Yajus of the black and white Yajurvedas, the 2 main recensions thought to be more pure. The white Yajurveda collects material just like Brahmariya. Another feature distinguishing the white Yajurveda is its second half, which is obviously later than the first and has no counterpart in the more homogeneous black Yajurveda. Like the Rigveda, the Atharvaveda is a collection of entire hymns rather than individual verses. However, due to its general lack of association with sacrificial ceremonies, some hesitated to accept its authority alongside the other 3 Vedas. Its current name is derived from one of the prominent, partly mythological, priestly families in the Rigveda, whereas its previous name associated the Atharvans with another prominent priestly family, the Angirazes. It is a variety of spells with various uses including luck, success, health and children. Of course, the sacrifice and the spell have much the same function. The Vedic subject matter differences are not absolute. Both seek to achieve comparable objectives. A common rain charm even today is a hymn from the Rigveda, VC 7-103, that compares the chanting of Brahmins to the croaking of frogs. This hymn is frequently misinterpreted as satire. Additionally, the Atharvaveda spells have been given a priestly appearance throughout. Book 20, the most recent edition, seems to have been created specifically to link the work to the sacrificial cult, and some spells related to the sacrifice are included. The Saunaka version of the Atharvaveda is usually cited, even though there are notable differences between the 2 recensions. The content varies in date and style, partly because of a conflict between popular origins and later priestly influence, even though some of the material was there before the F. A significant amount of intellectual development occurred prior to the composition of the most recent sections, as evidenced by the fact that 1/7 of its hymns, especially those from the 10th book, are taken from the Rigveda. Nonetheless, some noteworthy passages of rhythmic prose resemble those found in the Rigveda, along with a bit more latitude in terms of versification, language, and meter. There are also deviations from the recognized linguistic norm. The composition's lateness and the material's popular origins are partially to blame for these discrepancies. From hymns with authentic poetic sentiments to indirect, repetitive incantations filled with a variety of demons and evil spirits, the commonplace arsenal of the common sorcerer, the style is equally varied. They occasionally clumsily graft onto a magical formula, changing it to suit its original purpose. The prayer to Varuna, the guardian of the human conscience, in the imposingly solemn prelude to a banal spell, 416, is one example. Rudra's pantheon is preserved in the Atharvaveda. The Rigveda develops Rudra's character and highlights his frightening side. The title, Lord of the Animals, denotes his development toward the attributes that Siva was later said to possess. Various spirits, including demons, devils, animals, healing plants and amulets, and some incredible hymns to earth are present. However, there is no notable female divinity despite her tendency to personify negative attributes and disasters as goddesses. Because of India's long history of firmly establishing philosophy's foundation in practical objectives, the Atharvaveda contains more philosophical speculation than the other 3 Vedas. Understanding the actual nature of things was a liberating force for the individual and a way to exert control over others, especially enemies, which led to short-term success and prosperity. The praise of Viraj, the principle of extension, 8.9-10, a hymn about Puru's creation, the cosmic man killed by the gods, 10.2. The praise of Skamba, support, a font of the cosmic tree, 10.7-8. The Brahmachari and the Vedic student, 11.5, are examples of the mystical language used to discuss cosmic themes. Each of these exemplifies creative principles. The Atharvaveda praises Kala, or time, as the primordial power, 19.53-4, and exalts the concept of Atman, 11.4. As the forerunner of the oldest Upanishads, the Atharvaveda provides important evidence of earlier Vedic philosophy and a helpful perspective on the development and continuity of Indian speculative thought. Recall that the Vedic culture was introduced to India by the Aryans. The Indus Basin had a highly developed urban culture long before they arrived, probably between 2500 to 1700 BC, of which we know very little. This Indus Valley Civilization has been supported by excavations at a number of cities, including Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, which are now in Pakistan. It is difficult to interpret the remains still standing because there are no written records, and the few brief inscriptions are untrustworthy. However, the collapse of the civilization appears to have occurred long before the Aryan invasion. The beliefs of some of these people persisted in popular culture and eventually blended with Vedic elements to form Hinduism. The main sources of speculation about the religious beliefs of the inhabitants of the Indus Valley are a few buildings, a large number of terracotta figurines, a large number of carved steel seals. Many buildings have been mistakenly categorized as temples due to their imposing structures and large open spaces, some of which have statues. The ruins don't provide enough information about the cult practiced there, even if these theories are true. More significant is the elaborate Great Bath complex at Mohenjo-Daro. The tank, up to 39 feet by 23 feet by 8 feet deep, was surrounded by porticos, sets of rooms, and a staircase to an upper story. The majority of primitive religions prioritize protecting the water supply, which is the most essential element for life. The economy of the Indus Valley was based on arable farming, which was made possible by some artificial river control. This bath emphasizes the importance of water in people's lives, even though it is used for ceremonial bathing rather than water storage. Modern Indian rituals include such tanks and routine bathing, which may carry on an old custom. Numerous stone statues in public areas are sometimes viewed as cult symbols. The identification offers more information about the religious pattern, even though there isn't much evidence to support it. A bust of a robed, bearded individual exudes a solemn dignity more befitting of a ruler or public official. The political system is not exempt from this uncertainty. The apparent existence of two capitals, which is thought to be impossible under a single ruler, and the conservatism of many facets of life, beginning with urban planning, are the foundations of the conventional wisdom that there is some priestly control. We do not, however, rule out other explanations. Many more small statues or figurines, mostly made of terracotta, have been found by us. Some show a standing woman with an elaborate headdress. Worshipping a mother goddess at home is prevalent in many ancient religions, but noticeably absent from the Vedas if these are religious. The evidence is still unclear, despite the fact that many of the Indus Valley figures have bloated shapes that are commonly associated with fertility deities and are thought to represent pregnancy. Additionally, many of them display traits of partial animals. The strongest evidence comes from the many inscriptions and decorations carved on the steatite seals, which may or may not have religious significance. Some of them are adorned with symbols or patterns. Others display more intricate landscapes or human or animal figures. The animals portrayed are varied, frequently simple to recognize, and include both domestic and wild species, including tigers, buffalo, rhinoceroses, elephant goats, and cobras. In spite of its prominence, the bull is not very important. Sometimes it is depicted with humans jumping over it. The public commonly sees composite figures of male or female humans with horns and other animal features. It has been asserted with confidence that one seal, which shows a seated human figure surrounded by animals, is a prototype of Siva Pasupati, the lord of the animals. Although it is associated with some figurines and is known as a fertility goddess, the sex of the figure is still unknown. Several seals feature a tree deity of unknown sex, sometimes with suppliants. One is said to show vegetation sprouting from the spirit's womb. Other scenes have been interpreted as human sacrifices. In addition to highlighting their complete reliance on natural forces, the physical remains of the Indus Valley cities typically need further evidence to faithfully represent their occupants' religious practices and beliefs. Those elements of later Hinduism that are obviously not Vedic can also be traced back to the Deccan Neolithic culture, which flourished between 2000 and 750 BC. This culture is linked to many, often large ash mounds in Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. The pastoral and semi-nomadic people frequently burn their cattle manure in the pastures, which causes these ash mounds. Despite being associated with communities, some of these mounds most likely reflect the seasonal movement of pastures. The firing of the cattle pens is thought to have been part of a seasonal migration ceremony. These people relied on their cattle, much like the worship of cattle and lighting lamps or bonfires during the modern festivals of Hon and Divan in the north and Pongal in the south. Ash could undoubtedly be used in rituals by Siva devotees. We must consider these theories to be established since they explain certain aspects of Hinduism that are not Vedic. During the Vedic era, the number of gods and spirits rose dramatically. However, the religion undoubtedly incorporated non-Vedic sources during and after the period. Their most distinctive feature is their apparent local character. They have permanent houses of worship outside the settlements, often in groves or on hillsides. These entities are referred to as yaks in the Rigveda, suggesting a manifestation or appearance of the supernatural. This emphasizes how often these skills are portrayed in concrete form from an early age. The phrase could be applied to any mysterious topic, as suggested by scenes from two later works that are covered in later chapters. In one part of the Kena Upani, An apparition known as a yak confuses the gods before revealing himself as Brahman, the supreme. In another Mahabharata episode, the Yaka, an unseen water deity, eventually reveals himself to be Dharma, Yudhi's divine father. Early Buddhist writings and the epic Mahabharata attest to Yak's relative fame. This is because their background is more widely accepted than the Vedic tradition. Buddhism tended to group supernatural beings under this term, while Hinduism kept different classes apart, giving them an ambivalent character. The cult of trees was incorporated into the cult of chaityas in Buddhism. A stone tablet or altar placed beneath a sacred tree was the most common way for Hindus to honor the yaksas, who were regarded as generally good. This suggests that the yaksas originated in vegetation cults that were similar to those that may have been theorized for the Indus Valley Civilization. Later, the Rakshasas, a group of unquestionably evil and crafty creatures, were linked to Kubera, the northern regent and god of wealth, who led the yaks. One important element is the veneration of Nagas, which are sometimes portrayed as half-human beings and other times as pure snakes, particularly the cobra. Although the Vitra is portrayed as a snake or serpent in the Rigveda, a different origin is suggested by the post-Vedic era's adoption of a new term and attitudes. Nagas were very ancient objects of worship, as evidenced by the widespread adoption of their cult as a subordinate element in various forms of Hinduism, even though there is a lack of early textual evidence, although they appear in the sutras, as we will discuss in the next chapter. Later on, the peasants' welfare depends on a particular type of chthonic deity. Nagas, like the snake king Mukalinda, play supporting parts in Buddhism. They are incorporated into Jainism as the Pasva symbol, and Vairavism as the cosmic serpent, Santa, upon which Vishnu rests. Essentially, they continue to be popular objects of worship among the villagers and permeate all the more advanced forms of religion. Additionally, they make their way into Saivism, where they are used as garlands for Siva and weapons for Ganesha. The 1st century BC is when the earliest records of Naga temple worship appear. Together with the Vedic traditions, these influences permeated the mainstream of the religion and produced a dynamic synthesis. Although this process only fully developed in the periods following the hymns, the Vedic period already included elements from non-Aryan sources, especially in the Atharvaveda.